All right. All right. So I'm gonna start with this book that we've been periodically going through, The Light of Egypt by Thomas H. Burgoyne. This is chapter 10, dealing with ceremonial magic. I know you guys. It was on my notes. I thought you were trying to. Appreciate it. All right. So the above title has been selected chiefly because in most works treating upon magic, we find it wrongly used, and therefore take the opportunity of explaining the matter, for there were no such terms in the vocabulary of the ancient magi. It is unfortunate that words of ancient origin are not more carefully used, in that we should attach so many different meanings to the same word. The terms ceremony, ceremonial, are nothing more nor less than what that eminent critic John Ruskin would designate as bastards of ignoble origin, which somehow or another have usurped the places of the rite and ritual. The word rite has descended to us from the Latin ritus of our Roman ancestors. Remember, this is not a Moorish author. So he's saying our Roman ancestors, which technically they are, because the Romans are Moor. Right. From our perspective, the Romans are Moors. It's just their ideology, right? So the Roman ancestors, and they received it from the more ancient riti of the Sanskrit, the Greek equivalent, which is rio, and means the method or order of service to the gods, right? Whereas ceremony may mean anything and everything, from the terms of a brutal prize fight to the conduct of divine service within church. So we got two differences: your service in the gods, and you got ceremony, which is more ritual exclusively. You can serve the gods and be ritual at the same time, or you could just be ritual. So when you're serving the gods, you're doing things for yourself. You're putting affirmations out there. You're doing things that make whatever you're trying to make come true, right? That'll be an example of a ritual or a rite. From the term, but no such chameleon-like definition or construction can properly be placed upon the word rite, for it means distinctly, if it means anything at all, the serious usage and sacred method of conducting service in honor of the gods or of superiors, and requires the attendance of the prophet or priest or someone duly qualified to fulfill such sacred functions for the time being. The ritual of magic. So anybody talking about they're doing rituals? For one, you want to always do the ritual on yourself every day. It's a ritual for whatever everybody got their individual goals and things they want to do, right? That's positive. You're going to do things to kind of make it happen. Get your mind right, diet, thinking clearly so you can absorb information, whatever the case may be, right? But if somebody outside of you is doing a ritual, make sure they qualify, right? That's we're just making sure we comprehending as we transition here where I move forward. So what will qualified be? That could be something that's you could get a perceptive energy to see like, oh, you know what? I feel like this person, it resonates with me or whatever. And you might not necessarily see a certificate from a whatever to show certification. Sometimes you don't need that. Sometimes you can just feel it right? Man is especially, and above all creatures, an organizing force. And when this is fact, we add the most interior and powerful of his sentimental instincts, veneration for the powers that be, and for the higher invisible forces of nature. One of those invisible forces of nature, I kind of just talked about it right now. If somebody giving you information, but you don't see no certificate on the wall to validate that they know what you're talking about, but it feels right. That's something you can't see, right? So that'll be an example. of higher invisible forces of nature. Higher, right? As it has been aptly termed, we cannot wonder that the earliest races of which we possess in any record are chiefly distinguished for their imposing and elaborate religious rites. In fact, it is to the stupendous temples and a colossal sacerdalism that we are indebted for 9/10 of the relics and records which we possess of them. Everybody know what relics are? Okay. Too true is that from what we have been able to discover, we are quite justified in asserting the ancient races were above all other things a profoundly religious people. So of course that Thomas H. Burgoyne is saying races, but we know it's one race, the human race. But we get where he's coming from, the original people. Their conduct was profoundly religious. And we can break down that word religious. And especially during the ancient times, we're talking about what? Back to realignment, practices, yoga, breathing exercises, mental stability, mastering instability of yourself, making yourself stable from an unstable place and knowing how to do that for yourself, right? That was more about religion versus today. Most people think religion is today, right? So the temple was the center around which revolved all their genius and art, and the sacred edifice became their grandest achievement in architecture. Moorish architecture. And its highest priest and its high priest, the most powerful individual in the state. You know what a state is. So, and I'm kind of digressing, but remember, when we're reading books that are not from a Moorish prescribed author, we take our lessons and it pops out in these books. So we know when we say the high priest of the state, what are we essentially saying? Of a
If you're looking at it from the law perspective, so the state is the state body of people.
That's why I wanted to hear that. So who will be the high priest?
The Moors. So the holy men, that's the Muslims.
Okay. All right. See how that pops out?
Getting into the temple of man. So like the Egyptians, it's like the same, like the temple of man. So it's everything dealing with the inside, it's the state, putting in that perspective.
But if you didn't know that part of the game that we went over, one would read this and will miss it. You know? Right, exactly. They think something like that. Right. In fact, it was in consequence of the real power invested in such sacred office that it was so intimately connected with the throne. And why royalty so frequently belonged to the priesthood or exercised priestly functions. Priestly functions. So why they have the state and the priesthood together at this time, right? I know we hear terms like the priesthood is dead and things like that, but in this context, we're talking about high priest, and the individual. Everybody's a high priest. Everybody's a sheep as far as in their own way. That's what they should, aspire to do instead of just one leader guy or whatnot. All right, and there can be no real doubt but that amongst the pastoral and more spiritual races of Earth's earliest inhabitants, the priest, by reason of his superior wisdom, was the first lawgiver. And by virtue of his sanctity of person and elevation of mind, became the first primitive king and patriarchal monarch whose scepter and symbol of power was the shepherd's peace crook. So now we're back to that crook. That, yeah, it's like a, I don't want to call it a cane, but like a staff. It's a staff that's scepter, but it's crooked at the top.
Right, they are used like that from the Egyptian.
Yeah.
We have their part too.
Not a site.
No,
Crook.
site is like what they say. Okay. Yes, sir.
Thing that was shot.
Yes, for the pharaoh.
You're right, the pharaohs have those.
Yeah.
They have the onk and the other one's little, it looks like a question mark.
Yeah.
What's called a crook.
Crook, there you go.
CROOK. And in the Bible, they'll say like, well, it's called the shepherd's crook, but in the Bible, they'll just say the shepherd. So when you got the shepherd is leading the flock, now we know that these really high priests and pharaohs are, it wasn't just somebody dirty and leading some lamb somewhere. You know what I'm saying? It's not, you know what I mean? Yeah. Okay, whose scepter and symbol of the power was a shepherd's peaceful crook, just as amongst the ruder nomads of the inhospitable north. So we already know nomadic just means to travel, right? We find the greatest hunters invested in the dignity of chief, whose significant symbol and scepter of royalty upon their Nimrod thrones was the trusty, successful spear. And the times in which we live had their full effect upon these symbols, so significant of rule. The monarch was transformed, or the monarch has transformed the spear into the less harmful mace, M-A-C-E. While the church has added an inch of iron to the crook. Therefore, the former has become less warlike and the latter less peaceful. And verily, in actual life, we find them so. The patriarchal sire, head of the tribal household, was the original priest and the hearthstone, the first altar around which the family rites were performed. And from this pure, primitive original have been evolved through progressive ages. The stately temple. Now he's saying the temple was stately. So he's saying the temple was a state. Thomas H. Burgoyne is telling you how the ancient people thought of the organization. The temple is a state.
Yeah, and that's probably why it's a separate church state. You know what I'm saying?
But I mean, if they're looking at it like that, it's kind of confusing how they put it, but in actuality, it goes together. Of course, we're not the church. It's not the church. We're not the church. But if they're trying to imply like politics and divine creed don't go together, then that's not true. Because it goes one in hand. Because when you're saying exercising the First Amendment, you're enforcing law by saying your religious creed, freedom of religion, which opens the door to the law. So, you got to have a 360 degrees of what's going on. Right. From this pure and primitive original have been evolved through progressive ages, the stately temple and the sacred person of the despotic pontiff. From the sincere prayer and pure aspirations of the human heart and the joyous offerings of fruits and flowers to the invisible powers around them, and from the souls of their beloved ancestors has risen the costly and complicated ritual of theology. And if theologians of today really knew the lost secret meaning of their complicated rituals. All right, so let me stop there. So he's implying that the rituals today are valid. It's just people that are doing the rituals today don't know the origin of the rituals. For example, walking counterclockwise, the Kabbalah building, the Kabbalah, right? Kabbalah. I got dyslexia today. But as we read in the Muslim versus Muslim, that is a expression of what? Right. On Hagar did a circle, so the water from the lake wouldn't leave, it would stay. So she did like a little carving to make sure the water stayed in that area. That's what that represents. Do the people that do that today know that? Or are they just thinking they're doing it in a dogmatic way? Robotically, right? So that's an example. That'd be an example of, you're back to praying, 5, 7 times a day. That's on point. We got to know what's the origin of it though. The transits of the sun. You paying homage to each angle of light throughout the day. And you're doing exercise in your yoga. The posture of the prayer is yoga in itself. Make us alive. It's yoga. It's breathing exercise. But if you're not looking at it like that, you're looking at it in a spooky way. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
That's basically like sit and meditate and watch the Sunday and Sundays and different angles. Earlier, like what I was mentioning, traveling to Barber and stuff like that, being able to catch the sun, certain avenues, boulevards, major points that you pull from the sun and what is on, which is that degree of being aligned with the, you know what I'm saying? Like you literally like I was telling Ali Khan and like we walked out of the studio back cave to see how big the moon was, how close it was. And like, it's like literally like, oh wow, you run that straight testimony. But it's just that feeling of energy that you get from the things of the sun at the time. Feeling the body. Like you'll start to like you even see how nature gets like in that very instant.
Yeah. And that's what most of the rituals are based on, either that or doing celebrations on the equinox and the solstice.
So it's basically a period of sun worship.
Not just sun worship.
In a sense,
That's the perspective of outside of the considers.
we're sun worshipers.
I mean, but the whole 5 times a day prayer is a ode to
You're paying homage.
Yeah, homage to the sun and like all that stuff.
Because that's
Yeah.
the greatest reflection of our creation.
Yeah. Because what does it do for you? What's the sun?
Sun
Sun charges it.
Vitamin D.
is life.
Heals you, gives you the light, you saw it.
Everything close.
It kind of sounds like 5 times a day prayer is like similar to like Da Vinci's ideal man. Because it shows like the abs and the workout process. Yeah. It sounds like kind of
Yeah, because arm, leg, arm, head, all that ways.
Yeah.
36. So that's it would not cheese says or
Right. That represents the universe. Man.
yeah.
Star. That's a little body right there. See the body? Arm, leg, all there.
So we got a triangle and pentagon in the middle. Pentagon in the middle. Does that mean anything at all?
All in all.
No, it's just it's what the star makes when
There's nothing like a little subtext to it, details.
Well, this part.
Yeah, like astrology has detail, like Ryan's belt, this star means this.
Yeah.
Earth, wind, and fire.
I'm gonna continue. And if the theologians of today really knew the lost secret meanings of their complicated rituals and the unseen powers lying behind their external symbols, their anxieties for the continued life of their dying creeds will be turned to new hopes of faith. So he's saying everything but saying dogmatic. He's calling these things dogmatic. That which they were teaching they knew and could practically use their knowledge given forth in their sanctuaries, and instead of offering up the supplications to an imagery, personal deity, their words, rites and ceremonies would take on the form and power that such should command and they will become truly what their title really means, a doctor of the soul. Then they could intelligently lead and direct the souls of their followers to the path of Christ. And he has in parentheses truth when he says Christ. Right? He knows what's going on. Which leads up to the salvation, not a vicarious atonement, but gaining the at-one-ment through the individual soul development to a conscious relation to the divine spirit we all call God, where it can say, I know. Out of those simple gifts, which were spontaneous offerings of love, remembrance, and unselfish charity, have grown the prayers, penances, sacrifices, and servile worship. Out of the paternal consideration of love of the aged sire has evolved the haughty, chilling pride of the selfish, isolated priest, and which reflects its baneful influence upon the worshipers at their feet. They have also changed their once sacred, faithful, and reverent obedience into suspicion and distrust, and with the educated to the utter disgust. The light has been extinguished, and the priests and people alike are grouping about in darkness. So I'll stop right there. So I went through this for numerous reasons. For one, you want to find information, once again, to wake the people up that are not Bays and L authors. Because people mind me like, oh, that's a Moorish perspective. So of course they're gonna be writing. So this is a non-Moorish person corroborating the lessons we already know. Right. So this will help wake people up. So I want to transition to some congressional records. And you read the book already, or you
Which one are you talking
more tactical?
about? Do you see it? Which one is it?
Yeah.
The one
One
right
you
here.
brought.
Oh, yeah.
You
yes.
read it?
Yeah, I read it.
Read
I
it?
already know it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
General Education Board, council notification, and so, yes.
Okay. Sure. It's mine.
Got it all right here too.
So I was gonna say this connects to Article 4, Section 1, so you know that. All right. It's a congressional record. All right, so this is from the 4th Congress, first session, and this was 1795. The reason why I'm bringing this up because, once again, you can go straight to the treaty, or you can bring things out of their congressional records. You can bring things out of House resolutions. You can bring things out of that manual, council notification access, and they're codified, right? And it's an easier pill to swallow when you can come at any person you're talking to from multiple angles. It just displays competence. And most of the time, you'll be shedding light, you know? All right. So this is 4th Congress, first session, number 107. And this was communicated to the Senate December 21st, 1795. And this was actually George Washington, greeting the Senate. Gentlemen of the Senate, herewith I transmit for your information and consideration the original letter from the Emperor of Morocco, recognizing the treaty of peace and friendship between the United States and his father, the late emperor, accompanied with a translation thereof in various documents relating to the negotiation by which the recognition was effected. That's a congressional record. Here's another one.
You
Yeah.
want to see it?
Oh yeah, he has.
Oh, I have it. It's right. Okay, go ahead.
All right. So extract from instructions from the Secretary of State. Actually, we're transitioning to another segment, actually. But you got the first one? 4th, okay. 4th Congress, first session?
Yeah, number 107?
Yeah.
Yes. All right, so now we're transitioning to an extract from instruction from the Secretary of State to Colonel David Humphreys, dated March 28, 1795. Quote, with respect to Morocco, it is proposed to obtain from the Prince Moulay Solomon a recognition of the treaty between the United States and his father, the former emperor. This you will attempt or endeavor to effect, if possible, for $20,000. But if you shall find that it cannot be accomplished under $25,000, you are authorized to go to that amount. This negotiation you may neither accomplish yourself or by agency, as you shall deem best calculated for the purpose, according as you shall find the state of affairs in Morocco upon your arrival in Europe. This is context. If you ever in court, open court, these are exhibits, congressional records connected to Article 4, Section 1 to lay the foundation that, for one, America is Morocco. It's not some outlandish thing, some sovereign citizen. This is in the records. All right. So transitioning to George Washington, President of the United States, addressing the Secretary of State. Quote, and actually this is George Washington addressing the Imperial Majesty, actually. Being desirous of establishing and cultivating peace and harmony between our nation and His Imperial Majesty, the Emperor of Morocco, I have appointed David Humphreys, one of our distinguished citizens, a commissioner plenipotentiary, giving him full power to negotiate and conclude a treaty of amity and commerce with you. And I pray you to give full credit. That lingo, full credit, that lingo is back to Article 4, Section 1. Full faith and credit on public acts, case law, etc., records. Right? So notice how that lingo is in George Washington addressing our emperor. I pray you to give full credit to whatever shall be delivered to you on the part of the United States by him, and particularly when he shall assure you of our sincere desire to be in peace and friendship with you and your people. And I pray God to give you health and happiness. This was signed in Philadelphia, the 13th day of March, 1795. All right. More congressional record, just to lay the foundation for one, that George Washington was in an inferior position. We already know George Washington letter to the Sultan. We all should be aware of that. So this goes with that.
4 years after he's president.
Right.
1795, 1791, George Washington came into office.
Mm-hmm. Right. Just all context. All right. Transitioning. This is actually D. Humphreys, the ambassador that George Washington elected to do treaty negotiation as an ambassador for the new found nation in the United States. He's one of the elected officials. All right. Be it known that I, David Humphreys, minister resident from the United States of America at the court of Lisbon, being duly empowered and instructed on the part of the President of the United States to negotiate and conclude a treaty of amity and commerce between the United States and His Imperial Majesty, the Emperor of Morocco, or to renew with his said Imperial Majesty, Moulay Solomon, right, which was the successor. The treaty established at the court of Morocco between the late Emperor Sidi Mohammed, which was Moulay Solomon's father, and the United States of America to constitute and appoint James Simpson, Consul of the United States at Gibraltar. Now, this is more context. It's like sidebar context too. He's at the Gibraltar. We all know where the Gibraltar is at, right?
No.
Where's that at?
Rock of Gibraltar?
Yeah, where's that at? Get somebody.
Isn't it Al-Andalus?
Mhm.
After his
Spain, so-called Spain.
Okay.
Say that again?
Al-Andalus.
the Prudential Rock, you know, that Rock Haven Prudential, the insurance company. They're talking about Andalus, which is Spain today, which is really Iberia.
That's what we call it. So we didn't call
That was our Red House. That's called the Red House.
Mhm.
That's why they made the White House.
Uh-huh.
So Rock of Gibraltar's a red mansion.
No,
it's-
the rock is actually talking about where it's at.
Yeah.
And Andalus is the red house at which they took over.
Which is a large house.
Right, the
In
large,
Gibraltar area.
right, and it fell January 1st.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
That's why I celebrate New Year's in the
And-
middle of winter.
Yeah.
And it's not our winter, it's not our New Year.
Nothing does.
Yeah, right, it's nothing else.
Would it make some history and time?
They're just trying to graft themselves onto us.
Yeah.
They've been doing that ever since.
It's like they're celebrating all their wins, every time that they won,
Right.
every time that they took us down, has nothing really to do with our story.
Right,
Thanksgiving, all of it.
Yeah.
Easter, all
Like
of
when
it.
they killed us,
Every
stuff like that.
right, it's their victory dance.
Yeah, their victory.
And they want us to dance for
Dance with
them, or
Yeah.
dance with them,
On
or
the fall
fall.
of our ancestors.
Therefore, I don't do that stuff.
It's like breeding colonization, like I see.
Right, I tell them, I don't celebrate your
There's
kids.
many layers to nation.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're creating, yeah, they're creating their world. That's their world, that's their celebration, but they want us to celebrate their.
And that's
but-
under the Christian Black Codes. You never read it. You ever read the
I'm
Christian?
familiar with it somewhat.
Right, it says that they will instruct the religious on us at all points.
Oh,
And
yeah,
on
yeah.
Christian, I mean, it's just, they're just saying, their religions don't matter, it's ours that we're gonna put on them and they're gonna celebrate it.
Oh, yeah. Actually,
That's
That's exactly
Yeah,
what it
turn
is.
it
That's what they're saying. Christian Black Code 1724, read it.
But-
That's ugly.
But the reason I'm bringing Gibraltar up is because to use your mind, why would we be talking about Gibraltar if we're talking about George Washington here?
Because they're really talking about here, just.
Right? And the empire,
This is the empire.
right, it covers that as well. It's
Right.
part of it.
So when you talk about the Sultan in Spain at the time, or what?
No, it's not even, look, this is James Simpson, consul of the United States at Gibraltar.
Hmm.
So yeah, you're right, but you have United States embassies in Gibraltar.
So Gibraltar's like the old school Geneva.
Don't caught up where the location, just know what an embassy is when somebody that's not from the land sets up on the land that's not theirs because they have some type of diplomatic negotiation with the land they're on.
Okay.
And it's just a place for their ambassadors to negotiate with the higher ups of with the people, like to keep the peace.
Okay.
Right? So they were in Gibraltar, a part of the empire. North America, South America, the empire. That's the empire, Gibraltar. So I'm just letting you know that this is a case in point that the empire was still the empire in 1795. Because he wasn't talking about America, but he still was an ambassador representing the treaty, which it got signed in America, in Gibraltar. That make-
Yeah.
You follow me? Okay. And Gibraltar is paying homage to General Tariq, which was a Moorish general that shut down Alan. It was a great plague. He cleaned up Europe, killed off all the nonsense in early 700s. He went up in there. And then we was in there from 711 to 1492. That was the start of that, right? So that's paying homage to that Moorish general, the Rock of Gibraltar, General Tariq. He is he was the strength of that time, basically.
Greatest general there ever lived.
Yeah,
According to the history, that's what I'm saying, he's the greatest general. And that's why they call it Roger Gibraltar.
Another new layers and.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So at Gibraltar, agent in the business aforesaid in conformity to the authority committed to me from George Washington, right? He was elected ambassador to negotiate treaty, etc. Hereby given to him the said James Simpson all the power necessary to arrange and agree from the same, and to certify and sign convention thereupon. Convention, treaty, bilateral agreement, contract, all the same thing. Reserving the same, nevertheless, when concluded, to be transmitted to me to the President of the United States for his final ratification. Right, ratification. That's if if documents, law, congressional records aren't ratified, then it's not law. Like the 14th Amendment, right? I just want to throw that out there. By and with the advice and consent of the Senate of the state of the United States given under my hand and seal at Gibraltar, this 21st day of May, 1795. I'll stop there, actually.
I just got the first page. It's like,
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Yeah,
this
just,
is way too much information to start. I mean, you would have.
Yeah.
So,
but these are good bullet points, just to have downloaded. With other information that you already know. So Article 4, Section 1, this is hooked to it as well. But now we know House Resolution, right, which states that our people are Aboriginal Indigenous, that's in play. So we can even open up the rights of Indigenous people, that sets the tone, right? We got the Sundry Free Moors Act, sets the tone. That was a congressional record of South Carolina, establishing the fact of Moors distinguishing themselves from blacks and Negroes. Yeah, any case law.
yeah, Willie Dundee case, Dred Scott case, those are the.
Yeah.
If you haven't read them, you kind of want to, and they're long, but it'll tell you a lot when you read it.
Anybody else have any thoughts while I look for this second piece? Thoughts, questions? Any questions, thoughts? I'm looking for this.
I just recommend making like what I did. Have it all and always keep the treaties with you.
Right.
Always keep the treaties with you. Because in that way you just either show it to them or read it to them and that's it. Because they signed it, right?
Right.
And it's law. Regardless of how incompetent or competent they are. Just hold them to it.
Pretty much.
Oh, this is part, that's like,
Yeah,
This
like-
month- I did it on